Coinbase is a really interesting place to work because for such a long time, the crypto community hated it. I think everybody has some Bitcoin wake-up moment where all of a sudden it starts to make sense to you. I remember mine was in 2013. I had heard about it in 2011 and it made no sense to me. And then by 2013, it clicked. So now what you can do as a Bitcoin holder is you can self-custodially stake your Bitcoins. You only have to trust Bitcoin. It's about bringing over net new people that have Bitcoin, that maybe miss DeFi, and giving them the tools, the applications where now they can go participate for the first time. I used to get asked pretty frequently, when do we get $1 million Bitcoin? I would always answer, I hope it's not tomorrow. I remember telling people back in 2013 that it was going to not be correlated, and I was very wrong for about a decade. XRP is the ultimate meme coin. I remember 2017, my then 75-year-old great aunt was buying XRP. That's just wild for Bitcoin to have a strategic reserve, and some rumors and some circulation around some nation states are already doing this. So we'll see.
Hello， 大家好，我是脑哥。我们常听到主张比特币只是一套虚空账本，除了炒作之外没有任何功能，挖矿除了消耗能源之外没有任何价值的批评。而确实有很多币圈人有相同的怀疑，因为当我们在讨论币圈赛道，所谓的去中心化金融 DeFi， 所谓的 RWA、GameFi、Crypto AI 等等项目，似乎都发展在其他链上，没有跟比特币本身有关的。当然，如果你能够买单数位黄金的意义，那上述这些疑惑可能也不是那么重要。但如果你对比特币区块链能做到的事情有更多的好奇，今天这支影片很值得一看。今天我们邀请到的 Rich Rines 是一位2013年就进圈的比特币 OG， 他是一位美国本土的连续创业家，曾在全美最大中心化交易所 Coinbase 负责过上兆美元的金流汇兑。同时，他还是去中心化比特币侧链专案 CoreDAO 的核心贡献者之一。可以说 ，Rich 是一个比特币各层次问题都最值得被请教的一个人之一了。今天我们聊的范畴，从2025年总经局势、美国采纳比特币政策的速率、比特币 DeFi 的发展与潜力，一直到大家最想问的币价预期跟逃顶策略长期展望。甚至我还在最后问了一点关于山寨币他的想法。那我们废话不多说，就直接开始吧。
So I'm Rich. Been with the Core Project now for quite a few years. The Core Project is leading the Bitcoin scaling race. There's about $1 billion in TVL, hundreds of thousands of daily active users, the largest real yield Bitcoin staking platform. And it's really the consumer chain for Bitcoin, the only chain that has both of these aspects, where you have kind of a full L1 on the other side and then a full yield project on the other that work symbiotically with one another. Prior to Core, I led money movements engineering at Coinbase for about 4 years. That was a lot of fun. We moved about $1 trillion. And it was just an amazing time in Coinbase's history, and so many fond memories of that. And then prior to that, I've run a number of businesses over the last 15 years or so as an entrepreneur. And I've been in Bitcoin since 2013.
Bitcoin 2013, and you've been working in Coinbase. I think that's a very exciting experience. Can you tell us more about working in Coinbase, like working in the biggest and the only listed crypto exchange?
Coinbase is a really interesting place to work because for such a long time, the crypto community hated it. And I think it's changed dramatically with Base, and amazing kudos to a lot of former friends over there for changing a lot of that perception. But I think the exchange business isn't often understood as much by the general public, and people view it as maybe predatory and that sort of thing overall. But it's a much needed avenue, right? You need the ability to on-ramp from your fiat currencies into crypto. And that's something that Coinbase really helped pioneer when it first launched back in 2012. It has really grown, to your point, into the only publicly listed US exchange. And the product offerings that they've put out have been nothing short of phenomenal, from a lot of these more CeFi approaches now all the way into DeFi with Base. But building crypto exchange is really hard. And what I mean by that is the way to think about so many of these other cryptocurrency projects, they're all bespoke in how they work. So in order to get enough funds on platform, off platform, it's actually a very challenging endeavor. And there's been a lot of other exchanges over the last decade plus who haven't got that quite right and have gone bust. And that's one of Coinbase's biggest claims to fame. It's never had a hack. It's always been fully solvent. And that level of trustworthiness and credibility has helped propel crypto in the US forward. I really enjoyed my time there, met a lot of amazing people who have now gone on to do even bigger and better things outside of Coinbase. but it was a really formative experience for me.
You lead a team about money flows and you're the lead engineering. Can you tell us about that?
It's important to kind of go into the nuts and bolts of, how a crypto exchange works, if that makes sense. You have all of like your different fiat pipelines, right? So imagine your Coinbase, you need to support pay-ins in the US, Canada, Mexico, Brazil. Like you go through all these different regions, but you need to use kind of TradFi rails on one side, or how do you get the actual like fiat on platform? On the other side, you have all these crypto networks, right? You've got Core, you've got Solana, Ethereum, like you name it. And you have all of those, and you have to worry about kind of processing all of those and getting them into your system in the right wallets, the right balances. All of those fundamentally become routing problems. And each of them, both on the TradFi side or on the crypto side, work in very bespoke manners. And that's one of the most challenging parts of building a crypto exchange, is making sure you understand how each of these different rails work under the hood. Because at least in the crypto world, there are no takebacks, right? Like those are bare instruments where once the funds are gone, there's no way to go get them back. In TradFi, you have some ability to get some of those funds back, but each payment rail works bespoke. It's different chargeback risk, kind of you go through the different pieces, but they're all very heterogeneous. And the ability to do that seamlessly at scale is quite challenging, because people, myself included, are very upset if your money doesn't show up and you think you have money there. It's a very nerve-wracking experience. It's very deep to the consumer journey, where if you send money in, you expect it to be credited nearly instantly, whether it's on crypto or on the fiat side. And that's a big customer education challenge and a big support problem, where it's like, how do you make sure that in times when things don't go quite right, not only are people whole, but the communication is done in a really excellent fashion. And that was what my team ran, was getting all the money onto Coinbase, getting all the money off of Coinbase, and then all the internal trading on top of the Coinbase platform. So it was a big job. I really enjoyed it, and I learned a ton, not only about different crypto networks, but also about all of these different fiat currency pipelines. And that also fully crypto pilled me even more. Like, I'd been in crypto for a long time, but dealing with TradFi and all the issues that, complexities that TradFi brings into the equation, it was even clear, hey, crypto is going to dominate, many of these existing rails. We should be spending, as much time as possible in crypto. And that actually, partially led to my involvement in Core.
So your job, basically, the people you have met also thinks crypto will be bigger. That will make you know crypto will be bigger, even more.
There's always differing views, but I think many people, particularly at Coinbase, are quite crypto pilled. And I think through stable coins, et cetera, we now have seen the better solution, and it's just a matter of time until we get there.
Yeah, perfect. So I feel like the recent market fluctuation of crypto has been greatly affected by whether the Federal Reserve would cut rate or how many times it will. As an American, you must be more aware of the real situation than any of us, right? So what do you think the overall financial market in 2025 will look like?
So if I can go back just to maybe to 2024, and we can just talk about kind of what transpired and now what might come ahead. I think in 2024, there was some pretty aggressive rate cutting last summer, and the idea was really trying to pull kind of as much good news into the election forward as possible. And I think there's been a lot of changes since then, but we'll talk about the crypto market kind of in the middle there. And I think we saw this fully over our skis from market perspective during the Trump win. And during the Trump win, we pulled forward even more good news. And we went from under 70K to, shortly after, within, 3 weeks or so, to 108K, right? And we saw just an amazing amount of pulling forward. And the biggest risk that I thought we had then was actually going straight to 150. I think if we had gone to 150,000, we would have then cratered back to 75 or whatever. It would have been a max pain scenario for a lot of folks. That would have been, on too high a leverage, et cetera. So I think it's actually playing out in a nicer way than we would have maybe expected, but still some challenges. Okay, what does that look like, early this year? Well, we've seen the Fed kind of waffle between hawkish news, dovish news, and I think there's a lot of debates on, hey, how many rate cuts are we going to get in 2025? Inflation's been a little hotter than people have expected. There's a lot of these kind of new exogenous variables. My personal view is I think we probably get 3 cuts over the year. I think we're still very much on course for a very exciting 2025, potentially 2026. Both in the traditional market and in the equities market.
Do you think the 2025 Bitcoin market will still very related to the stock market?
I think it's going to be fairly related. I mean, I think what's interesting is if you look at the equities market, which again, admittedly, I'm not an expert in, it's really like NVIDIA beta today, right? And it's really just looking at what is NVIDIA doing? And then based upon that, kind of all of the financial markets hopes and dreams in the US are fairly centered around And I think that will probably continue to be true over 2025. We'll see if it goes 2026 and beyond. But where there is such tight concentration in US equities, I think it really is how a few companies are doing that are determining the overall market. And that's actually led to a little bit of the lack of correlation on the Bitcoin side, which I think net is good. I remember telling people back in 2013 that it was going to not be correlated, and I was very wrong for about a decade. So we'll see if that trend continues.
Do you think Bitcoin can act like a digital gold, like risk-off assets?
I think Bitcoin as a hedge is getting more and more popular, right? But it really does come into can we break that historical correlation? Again, we've seen signs of it, but we haven't been able to do it over a really extended period at any point in Bitcoin's history so far. But I think as we get to potentially strategic Bitcoin reserves, we see other nation states starting to buy Bitcoin, like we can get to a spot where it actually serves as that collateral asset, as that inflation hedge at nation state scale. And I think at some point that does become true. I'm not sure if that will happen short term or many years out, but I do think, and that's what got me into crypto back in 2013, was this idea of Bitcoin helping to bring about not only just a non-sovereign store of value, but an alternative to the traditional financial system. And I think we're now, with scaling solutions like Core, potentially able to start to realize that vision, not just for large TradFi players or whales, but for everyday people, where now they can use Bitcoin on faster, cheaper rails and start to kind of get some of those same properties in their own wallet versus having to go through a centralized custodian, et cetera. So I think it's like that's kind of the journey curve of Bitcoin, if you will, which is coming into that narrative, which has been a 15 or 16 now year journey. And I think will continue to develop over the next several years.
So we know that President Trump wasn't a big fan back in his last presidency in 2017. What do you think, why it changes in his mind?
So I think at a macro level, I think everybody has some Bitcoin wake up moment where all of a sudden it starts to make sense to you. I remember mine was in 2013. I had heard about it in 2011 and it made no sense to me. And then by 2013, it clicked. And I think, for Trump and maybe some of the people around Trump, I think in 2017, we were just too early, right? And I think if you look at a lot of the behavior in the crypto space in 2017, ICO mania was running rampant. There was, a lot of bad behavior in the space. It did help set about a lot of the good behavior that we have now, but it was much more kind of the wild west of crypto. And I think as part of that, it was hard to maybe see as clear of a picture from his seat than he could see now. And I think we saw a pretty dramatic shift in this year's or last year's elections in the US. Crypto has become a strategic issue for candidates now. It can't be ignored. So I think it was one of these, like, eventually you start to become important enough where you're too big to ignore. And then when people start to do the homework, which I believe the administration have done, they can see this being an interesting move and actually potentially very important to the US over time. So again, it's all about when the Bitcoin moment hits you.
As an early Bitcoin believer and an initial contributor of CoreDAO, a DeFi as well, could you tell us more about CoreDAO itself?
Core is the leading Bitcoin scaling solution. So the way to think about it is, on one side, the largest, healthiest Bitcoin DeFi ecosystem, or BTC5. So there's hundreds of thousands of daily active users, there's hundreds of projects that are launched, and about $1 billion in TVL. So it's very liquid. And as a user, you can participate in all different sorts of DeFi protocols, games, you name it. And it's really trying to build a Bitcoin denominated ecosystem, because this is what we believe Bitcoin DeFi or BTC5 really looks like. It's not just taking the Ethereum applications and bringing them over and trying to just win over those Web3 users. It's about bringing over net new people that have Bitcoin, that maybe miss DeFi, and giving them the tools, the applications where now they can go participate for the first time. And that audience is absolutely massive. And some of these protocols, I think, will look deliberately very simple, but will hit some of the most important functions of a Bitcoin holder, which is upside exposure to Bitcoin, leverage, and stables. And we think that's how we ultimately can grow BTC5 to potentially billions of people around the world. On the other side of Core, there's also Bitcoin staking. So now what you can do as a Bitcoin holder is you can self-custodially stake your Bitcoins. You only have to trust Bitcoin and then go earn Core yield for doing so. And there's a middle ground, which is called dual staking, which is you stake Core in Bitcoin and you earn higher yields. And that middle ground is kind of the crawl, walk, run, where now you don't have to deal with bridge risk, or maybe you're not ready for full Bitcoin DeFi, but you can now get high yields on your Bitcoin for the first time. You're never giving it to a third party or anything else, which is so critical with all the bad behavior we've seen in the space. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is bring people along that spectrum, right? From, hey, I'm just sitting on my Bitcoin, to now I'm staking my Bitcoin, dual staking it eventually into full Bitcoin DeFi. And that, in total transparency, is a 5-10 year journey. It's going to take a long time to get there, but that prize is trillions of dollars by the time that we get there. I think this is easily one of the largest untapped markets in the entire world, not just all of crypto. And I think as Bitcoin scaling solutions like Core continue to mature, I think we remap and remake a lot of what DeFi looks like today to be using the best money any of us will ever know, which is Bitcoin. And I'm super excited to help bring about that change.
I used to hear people bridge Bitcoin onto Ethereum or other chains to do DeFi on their chain. What do you think is the difference or the importance of doing like a core? What's the difference between core DeFi, like BTCFi, other than Ethereum DeFi, for example?
So I think so on one level, like there is a difference in terms of we're hoping to build things that have better trust assumptions than kind of your classic custodial Bitcoin derivatives or your classic custodial LSTs. So that's a big focus for us. I think when we look at Ethereum DeFi for Bitcoin, it's WBTC and Aave for the most part. It's not really very interesting, but it does solve a critical case, which is, again, holding onto your Bitcoin or wrap Bitcoin derivative in that case and getting leverage, which is really important. I think that's kind of where it stopped in the Ethereum ecosystem. And some of that, again, will get naturally transposed. And we have many of these protocols on Core. We have co-lend, your borrow lend, Glyph, your DEX, perps, Satoshi perps. Like we've got all these different protocols. Being Bitcoin-based versus Ethereum-based is a big differentiator. But I think the biggest story of Bitcoin DeFi isn't just necessarily in the innovation, like net new protocols, which is really important to us. But it's this idea of education and audience expansion. There's hundreds of millions of people that hold Bitcoin. The vast majority of those people missed out on DeFi. Some of it was deliberate. Hey, I hate Ethereum or whatever else. But for a lot of people, they just didn't really know about it. Or maybe the trust assumptions weren't right yet. Like they weren't able to participate in the way that they wanted to. And that's what's so critical of this core solution and what we care about and why we have that, step-by-step solution from staking, dual staking to BTCFi, because we need to meet people where they're at today and then help them kind of mature into those different pieces. They can always stop if they don't want to go any further. We can't force you to do that. But the idea is by the time you're ready, we should have protocols that are either already live or soon to be live that will meet those needs for you. And that's a big vision. There's a lot of work that goes into that. But I think to think about kind of a funnel, if you will, and like kind of Web 2 mechanics, the audience of people that have heard about Bitcoin is absolutely enormous. Like billions of people have heard about Bitcoin today. Then you go into the people that, have Bitcoin today, like hundreds of millions. You already have like a big drop off. And then you keep going all the way through. The BTCFi audience today is quite small relative. And that's also what's so exciting. It's by bringing people along that spectrum, hopefully with better risk assumptions, better trust assumptions, and then having amazing protocol, they can go earn healthy yield on their Bitcoin.
I've heard that there's Bitcoin layer 2. Is Core one of the layer 2s?
So in my mind, no Bitcoin L2 actually exists today. And that's like partially a controversial thing for some groups, for others it's not. I do think we will get there as time goes on, maybe with a soft fork like OpenCat, or maybe we'll get some other changes to the base layer that enable true Bitcoin L2s. I think the majority of the Bitcoin L2s so far today have been kind of hypey marketing, but there's amazing teams that are working on this. And I think BitVM will hopefully be production ready by middle of this year. So we will get there. I just think as of now, it's been, mostly marketing, but I'm excited for these innovations to get there because I do think that there's amazing teams that are building, great protocols. Core has taken a different approach. Core is a sidechain. Core has about 70 to 80% of the Bitcoin hash rate currently securing it. So what we did is instead of building, directly on Bitcoin, we built essentially to the side of Bitcoin. And we get to reuse Bitcoin hash rate, Bitcoin stake, et cetera, to help secure the chain. And I think as some of this other tech, gets fully fleshed out, whether it's BitVM or eventually OPCat, Core will investigate other ways that we can more directly interact with Bitcoin. I think for now, we wanted to build something that people could use today versus things that needed net new technical pieces that are kind of unproven or aren't battle tested yet. And that was a deliberate choice where we knew this Bitcoin DeFi problem and this Bitcoin scaling problem was very important. So how do we go solve that today? And we've done so. And that's one of the reasons the ecosystem has had such strong success. But we will continue to innovate at the edges and try to find other ways to get even more involved in the Bitcoin space.
I heard you talk about Core has 75% of Bitcoin's consensus. And I read a lot of articles that says Core uses Bitcoin miners to provide security and consensus. Is that understanding correct? I don't quite understand how that works. And doesn't it compromise performance, like the speed of the chain?
So another really, really great question. Let me take it up a level and talk about Satoshi Plus. So Satoshi Plus has three prongs. There's this delegated proof of work, there's Bitcoin staking, and there's core staking. And each one adds some amount of security to the chain. To kind of double click into the delegated proof of work one, where the question was founded, was many people in the Bitcoin ecosystem have heard of merge mining. So the idea is you run kind of a similar consensus to Bitcoin, or exactly the same to Bitcoin. And as those miners are solving Bitcoin puzzles, they can also solve puzzles in your network. It's kind of the idea of how it works. That has some negative, nasty economic externalities potentially, where now the miners who may or may not really care about your ecosystem now are incentivized to potentially act Byzantine, to censor blocks or do other things to capture more and more rewards for themselves. And we actually saw something similar happen in Stacks pre-Nakamoto. They've since fixed it. But I think the way to think about many of the Bitcoin miners is it's a perfectly competitive space. Profitability is challenging. If you can find ways to get legs up, you often will take it. So with some of those externalities, we said, okay, how else could we rethink this in a way that maybe wouldn't have some of those same issues? And that's where we came up with this idea of delegated proof of work. So what the Bitcoin miners, or more correctly mining pools in this case, do, when they create a block in the Bitcoin chain, they add some data to the OP return field that says, here's the core validator I want it to go to, here's where I want my rewards to come on the core chain. It's all trustless, auditable, and verifiable on the Bitcoin Block Explorer. You can go check out mempool.space or similar and see, almost 4 out of every 5 blocks have core in the OP return. And we have this actor called a relayer that runs a light client that trustlessly brings over these different things, ensured by this actor called a verifier. And by doing that, we operate on a 1-week delay. But the idea is to kind of reimagine merge mining, get rid of some of those incentives to act Byzantine. And with that, we've had quite a bit of adoption from these mining pools who have gotten involved in mass, which has been great. And now with Bitcoin staking, these mining pools have a new option. So instead of just selling their Bitcoin, selling their core, what they can do is they can stake their Bitcoin, stake their core. And what we've actually seen is that some of these folks have actually gone from just treating this like a merge mine token to now treating it more of an asset for staking purposes. And that's a big kind of symbiosis between core and Bitcoin that we're trying to put in place, where as the Bitcoin block reward diminishes, particularly over the next 4 to 8 years, core wants to help subsidize those Bitcoin miners by producing this second block reward. So there's definitely a long-term alignment between the two chains, but that's kind of the quick nuts and bolts of how the delegated proof of work works.
Wow. I saw many articles highlight core dual staking. And what's more interesting, there is something that MicroStrategy inspired, CoreFi. Can you elaborate on what CoreFi is?
So CoreFi is trying to be the MicroStrategy for core. So what many people maybe aren't as familiar with is Solana strategies or Sol strategies. There's also SolFi, I think, is in the process of getting built out. But the idea is this MicroStrategy, levered acquisition mechanism has been really powerful for Bitcoin. Michael Saylor has, arguably become like kind of the new Bitcoin Jesus. But the idea here is to have these vehicles that are very aligned with the underlying network and to help bring about the idea of these as treasury assets for these, major buyers of these assets. And what we've seen with MicroStrategies has already been a proliferation to MetaPlanet and some of these others where people are seeing this strategy and saying, hey, having Bitcoin as a treasury asset is really powerful and ultimately very accretive to the stock performance of many of these TradFi vehicles. I think last I checked, MicroStrategy and then MicroStrategy Converts are actually some of the best, if not the best performing equity vehicles or derivative vehicles over the last several years. And when we thought about what could something look like in the core ecosystem, it was, hey, people are doing it in Solana. Solana is 100 times bigger than core. This has been very accretive for them. Plus they have staking. Hey, maybe something like this for core would make a lot of sense, where not only it's Bitcoin aligned, but now with dual staking, it's even tighter alignment with the network. And simply put, we couldn't be any more excited for CoreFi to launch. No one's ever tried to run, a product like this for an asset the size of core. And I think being Bitcoin aligned by having both Bitcoin and core in its treasury kind of makes it like a high beta MicroStrategy. So it's really interesting.
Perfect. Can you give us your 10-year price prediction for Bitcoin? What's your bear case, base case, and your bull case in 10 years?
So much of that question is related to what happens in the rest of the world. I used to get asked pretty frequently, when do we get $1 million Bitcoin? And I was always answer, I hope it's not tomorrow. Because if it's tomorrow, like the world is burning around us and, like everything's a mess. We're in World War III or, something else, right? I think my view on it now is like, it's really hard to project that far out. But I think, in 2025, I think we probably hit 200, which I'm, super stoked about. Then I think we, kind of come back from that trough, but from that peak. But net in like a 10-year horizon, I think my base case is probably somewhere around $1 million. I think that's probably roughly right. I think the bear in that case is like maybe 250, like assuming that like there's just not that much movement. And then I think your bull case is, some amount of millions on top of it, low single digits. There's just so many weird, like hard to price pieces on a macro level that, I don't have enough insight into. But I think you get geopolitical conflict, you get out of control inflation, you get, civil unrest. There's just so many things that could go into that, but that's probably roughly how I would think about it.
Do you think the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve will be passed this law in 2025 or in Donald Trump's presidency?
This one, I've kind of waffled on this one. This has been a challenging one for me. I think originally I was pretty convinced it was going to happen in the first 100 days. Then when the Republicans swept, all the different branches, I was like, maybe there's too much alignment here. There's probably other bigger issues that need to get solved in the US than just crypto. Although I do think that is a strategically important priority for the US government to go solve. My guess is sometime during Trump's presidency. I don't think it will be in the first 100 days. That could be 2025. I'm not sure.
Is this, like you just said, $1 million Bitcoin dollar price moment? If this have to happen very fast, means something is happening too soon.
And this is something else that I've been like kind of mixed on. I don't think it's purely net good for Bitcoin to have a strategic reserve and to have like G7 countries starting to pile into Bitcoin. Because I think there's a couple other, things that could happen there. One, price goes up, right? Because, all these groups are, price insensitive buyers that have, large reserves of treasuries or, just general currency they can go put into these things. But I think the next part is like, do you get to confiscations? Maybe not in the US, but maybe in other places. Like, it's not purely up only without any of these other, potential problems. But I do think it would have a material change in Bitcoin's price. I think that's the Bitcoin God candle that people have been looking for like the last several years, because I think just the amount of capital that nation states have to be able to go out there and to go buy Bitcoin is just so different than the normal capital flows of the asset itself. There's also been, some rumors and some circulation around some nation states are already doing this. So we'll see. Could be a sell the news, but I don't think so.
Yeah. Do you watch the crypto market other than Bitcoin? So can I ask a altcoin question?
The chance I've heard of it, I mainly focus on Bitcoin and and Bitcoin related assets, but there's always a chance.
Okay. Oh yes. So let me ask. So there's 3 assets. You can either hold, long, or short. So they are Ethereum, Solana, XRP. Long, short, hold.
I like where we're at in the market cycle and everything else, I would probably long all 3. I think, and this was like something that I myself didn't think through, but like XRP is the ultimate meme coin, and like that was so obvious in retrospect. I mean, I remember in 2017, my then like 75-year-old great aunt was buying XRP, and like that's just wild, when I think back on it. But I think like that kind of Dino coin rally was very left curve. And it was great for people to realize like, hey, maybe you don't need to be, 160 IQ to go play the crypto markets. But I think where we're at, I think all those are good bets. I think ETH is in like this most hated, kind of position right now. But I think they're doing great work, and I do think it will reverse. Much harder to talk about like Sol ETH or something. I don't know what I would do in that situation.
So you think XRP is an ultimate meme coin as well? Very few people in Chinese community talk about XRP, but I think a lot of, I don't know if it's in America or just English community, they somehow just love XRP. They have a Ripple XRP army, right?
They have a crazy army, a crazy community. I mean, I think the meme back in 2017 was XRP to like $589, which is like quadrillions or so. I have to do the math on that, like just some insane amount of money. And now with TikTok, that's gotten like reignited, and even like people have like $100,000 XRP targets, which is just like insane. So like people are just kind of divorced from math in bull cycles, and for whatever reason, like they did such a great job marketing back in 2017 and that sort of cycle where there is a ton of awareness, and so much of crypto is just that awareness attention game. And that's why so many people are long in Doge, right? Because they're like, we're just going to see Doge on TV with Elon and Vivek for the next 2 years. So it's like if Doge is just in your face, constantly, like the odds it does well, and I think that's roughly the XRP thesis.
Do you have an exit plan in 2025, or what will you think is the signal you think the market is too bullish that maybe it's too high?
It's a great question. I think it's really the second derivative, right? So how violent is the move to 200 or whatever that is? But in general, like it's just never a good time to sell Bitcoin on a long enough time horizon, right? Like not only taxes and that sort of thing, but I do believe Bitcoin is the hardest money we'll ever know. It's the scarcest asset in the world. And I think that's something that, just can't be priced. So it's really hard to time market cycles. I am not a trader by any sense of the imagination. I'm a long and hold guy with assets like Bitcoin and Core.
And that's the perfect answer I can hear.